Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live in a world without elections? Well, we're going to jump back in time about 3,000 years to ancient India to figure out how someone became a ruler when they couldn't just be voted in. This is a story about a huge shift in power, a total game changer in how societies were built and how leaders were made. I mean, think about it. Today, for a lot of us, power comes straight from the ballot box. You know the drill. You show up, you cast your vote, and boom, you've had a say in choosing your own rulers. It's a process we're all pretty familiar with. But what if you couldn't do that? What if there were no elections at all? 3,000 years ago, becoming a ruler, a Raja, was a completely different ballgame. So how on earth did you land the top job back then? Well, it definitely wasn't about winning a popularity contest. It was all about proving, in a very public, very spectacular way, that you were the strongest person around. And the ultimate way to prove that? By performing these massive, elaborate sacrifices. Yeah, and the biggest, most important of these rituals was the Ashvamedha, the horse sacrifice. Now, this wasn't just some ceremony. It was a huge political statement. It was a high-stakes, public challenge to every other ruler for miles around. Here's how it worked. A special horse was just let loose to wander wherever it wanted for a whole year. If that horse wandered into your kingdom, you had a choice, and it was a big one. You could either stop the horse, which meant you were declaring war, or you could let it pass, which was basically you admitting, in front of everyone, that the horse's owner was more powerful than you. If the horse made it back unchallenged, the Raja who sent it would hold this enormous sacrifice, and guess what? Every single ruler who let the horse pass had to show up as a guest. And this scene at the sacrifice, it shows you everything about the social order of the time. The victorious Raja is the star of the show, sitting on a special throne, maybe even a tiger skin. His charioteer, who was literally his companion in battle, acts as his personal hype man, chanting poems about all his glorious victories. But look closer at who's there and who isn't. Ordinary folks, the Vish or Vaishya, brought gifts, but an entire group of people, the Shudras, were intentionally kept out of the ceremony by the priests. So you see, power wasn't just about military might. It was about enforcing a strict social hierarchy. And that leads us to our next point. This idea of a rigid social order wasn't just for special occasions. As these kingdoms got bigger and more powerful, priests started writing down rules for the whole of society, creating this strict structure that would shape life for centuries to come. This was the Varna system. Society got divided into 4 main groups, and the priest said your group was determined by birth. Simple as that. At the very top, you had the Brahmins, the priests. Next came the Kshatriyas. They were the rulers and warriors. Then you had the Vaishyas, who were the farmers, herders, and traders. And right at the bottom were the Shudras, whose job was to serve the other 3 groups. And just look at the difference in rights. The top 3 could perform sacred sacrifices, but Shudras were forbidden from taking part in rituals or even studying the holy texts, the Vedas. But here is the really crucial part. Not everyone just accepted this. From the very beginning, there was pushback. Some kings, for example, thought they were superior to the priests. Other people argued that your birth shouldn't decide your place in life, and that there shouldn't be any differences based on what job you did. And while all these social debates were going on, the actual scale of political power was just exploding. It started with Rajas leading Janas, which basically just means the people or a tribe. Then those evolved into Janapadas, literally the place where the people set foot as they settled down. And by about 2,500 years ago, some of these became massive Mahajanapadas, or great kingdoms. So what was the big upgrade? What made a kingdom great? Well, they weren't just bigger. They were way more complex. Rulers started building these massive fortified cities to protect themselves and project their power. They stopped relying on part-time militias and started keeping standing armies, professional soldiers who got paid a regular salary. And to pay for all of this, you guessed it, they introduced a brand new system of regular taxes. The most important tax was the one on crops, and it was usually fixed at 1/6 of whatever a farmer produced. This was called the bhaga, which means share. This shift from just hoping for occasional gifts to demanding regular taxes was a total game changer. It was the foundation of the modern state. Now, just as this model of a powerful king was taking off, it turns out it wasn't the only option on the table. At the exact same time, a totally different form of government was developing, which led to this really fascinating contrast between 2 powerful neighbors. On one side, you had the kingdom of Magadha. This place was the superpower of its day. I mean, it had everything going for it. Big rivers like the Ganga and Son for transport and fertile soil, dense forests full of timber and, get this, war elephants. Plus, it had iron ore mines for making stronger tools and weapons. Add in a couple of super ambitious and ruthless rulers, and Magadha was basically built to conquer. But then you had its neighbor, Vajji, which was organized as a Gana or a Sangha. This basically means an association or an organization. And it was a totally different political experiment. Instead of having one all-powerful king calling the shots, they had many rulers. So let's just break down the difference. In Magadha, you had one powerful king, and power was hereditary. In Vajji, you had lots of rulers, each one called a Raja, and they had to meet up in assemblies to discuss and debate everything before making a decision. It was an early republic. But, and this is a big but, even in this more collaborative system, take a look at who was left out. Women, slaves, and landless laborers were completely barred from these assemblies. So, what was the secret to Vajji's success? Why did this republic last for so long? Well, according to an ancient Buddhist text, when the king of Magadha was plotting to conquer them, the Buddha himself laid out their strengths. He basically said that as long as the Vajjis held frequent public meetings, acted together, followed their own established rules, and respected their elders, they would thrive. Their real strength was their unity and their process. And all of this ancient history, it's not just a collection of old stories. It brings up these timeless questions about how we should govern ourselves, who gets to have a say, and what power really is. And what's really fascinating is that this experiment in republican government in India wasn't happening in a vacuum. Around the exact same time, way over on the other side of the world in Athens, another new form of government was taking shape: democracy. But let's take a closer look, because just like the Vajji Sangha, Athenian democracy had some serious limitations. In Athens, only free men over the age of 30 were considered citizens with full rights. Women, foreigners, and thousands of slaves had absolutely no say in the government. So in both of these groundbreaking systems, rule by the people really meant rule by a very specific and pretty small group of people. Which brings us right to our final big question. From the horse sacrifice that kept the Shudras out to the assemblies in both Vajji and Athens that shut out women and the working class, we see this pattern over and over again. So I'll just leave you with this to think about. If a government is run by many people, but it still excludes huge chunks of the population, who truly holds the power?